yeah. Oh, this whole section, look at this. Look at those speckles. Like, I'm so impressed with just how well this yarn speckled. So good. So I'm very pleased, very happy. Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Meg. I am a yarn dyer behind the brand Megs & Co. And I'm so excited that you're here with me today. This is actually a part 2 video. In part 1, I dyed all of this wonderful yarn in front of me. So if you are interested in that content, I'll link below and you can go ahead and watch that video. And it's not just a yarn dyeing demonstration, it's actually a full tutorial video, start to finish, that includes the recipe, the materials, absolutely everything that you would need to follow along with me to dye all of the yarn that you see here in front of me. We were working with, this is called Lily. It's from Nomad Yarns. Here is the label. Nomad Yarns is a yarn distributor, and they distribute both at wholesale rates and regular retail rates. So whether you are a business like myself, like an indie yarn dyer, and are purchasing in large quantities, you can purchase at the wholesale rate. But if you just want to try yarn dyeing on your own, as a hobbyist, just for yourself, you can purchase at retail pricing, so you don't need a business license. Okay, so Lily. Lily is a non-superwash yarn. It is 100% fine merino wool. 328 yards, 100 grams. It is a 3-ply sport weight, super soft. It feels really good in my hands. It's got excellent, like, plump to it. I feel like that's kind of like a weird way to describe it, but like, it really does. It just feels like just really lofty. So in part 1, we dyed 2 tonal colorways in 2 different recipes. We did one semi-variegated recipe, and we did one speckled colorway. And I wanted to keep things easy because while that was an in-depth tutorial, doing 4 different recipes, 4 different dye techniques is a lot. So one of the things that I did to make it easy, to make the supplies that you would need a little bit easier, is we only used 2 dyes. So this was just a single blue dye from Dharma Trading Company. This was a single green dye. We mixed them together to do our semi-variegated, and then we speckled those 2 colorways to do the speckled colorway. So you only need just the 1 pack of Lily and the 2 dyes from Dharma Trading to dye all this yarn. So I tried to keep things as simple and easy for this first experiment, and then in that way you can try multiple different techniques and get some really great results. Okay, so how did they come out? So the first color that we dyed, we used Dharma Trading Company's Steel Blue, and we dyed this to a 1% depth of shade. So essentially dyeing this to the color square that would have been on Dharma Trading's website. And I think that it came out really well. This is a color that I love really well. I know, and I don't know if you can see, it's got like almost like a shine to it. It's really pretty. So I do have the unskeined version. So you can see it came out pretty even. So I always like my yarn to look more tonal rather than fully solid. Like I want to see that my yarn is hand dyed. I like to see, gradual shifts in the color. We buy hand dyed yarn for a reason, because you can see those subtle changes in the color throughout the fabric. And it's something that you really just don't get with a machine dyed yarn. If you want a truly perfectly solid yarn, buy machine dyed yarn. There is excellent machine dyed yarn and there's nothing wrong with it. So I guess for me, you read about what's the right way to do it and making sure, that you're using leveling and all this stuff. And I don't want to do it that way because I actually want to do it the wrong way because I want to see those shades floating across my fabric. So with all that said, this came out pretty dang even, which is not a bad thing either. Because at the same time, while I like to see that my yarn is hand dyed, I also don't want like white spots. I don't want blotchy areas. I don't want white spots. I didn't want something that was variegated, so it did have to be even, so to speak. And I'm very happy with this. This yarn took the dye very well. The pan's fully exhausted, so there was no dyes left behind in any of these pans. I don't see any areas of resist, so I'm very happy, very pleased with how this yarn took this dye. It's beautiful. So that is the steel blue. The next color that we dyed was Dharma Trading's forest green. This is another great kind of a bluish green, like a spruce green. Really pretty green. And we did the same techniques for both. So again, this was a 1% depth of shade. So we just added 1 gram of the dye per 1 skein of it that was in our pan. So because we had 2 skeins in our pan, we actually added 2 grams total, just as a little recap of what we did there. And here is how that came out. Really pretty. Yeah, you can definitely see how this dye happens just to be a little bit more blue leaning, so that's why I thought it would look really well when we started to kind of mix them together. Yeah, really pretty. And again, it took the dye, this yarn took the dye really well. There's no areas that there's no areas of resist. So there's no areas that are showing that they have maybe residual spinning oil or anything. It just looks wonderful. The spin on this looks great. It's beautiful. And you can see too, so this is what I was talking about. I don't mind when there's little areas that are, kind of have some highs and lows. So here's a little area that, where are you? It's a little dark spot right there. Right here. So this is probably, some people call them hot spots. So this is a little spot where the yarn was probably directly on the heat. So it drove the dye into the yarn just a little bit faster in this particular spot. And, and I don't mind that. I like that because that's what adds those shifting colors. You knit that up, and it's going to blend into your fabric and just create so much beautiful interest once it is blended into this whole skein. So love. Yeah, so very happy. So then we started to get a little bit creative and started getting into creating a variegated colorway. So we took our blue dye and our green dye and started pouring them on the yarn, just kind of across the yarn into stripes, and then merging them together so that they would blend together to create this much more variegated. We're leaving tonal. The colors are quite similar, so that I feel like it still has a very tonal effect to it, but just based on the technique and the fact that we now have two different colors in here, this is what I would consider variegated. And this is really, so especially when I'm testing out a new yarn, I like to test out all the different techniques because I want to see all the different ways that that a yarn is going to take the dye. So how is the yarn going to speckle? How is it, how well is it going to take the dye? And that, if I were to mix colors together, can I get sharp stripes of color? And then, how well is it going to take the dye for tonal colorways? And then part of the tutorial was to demonstrate how to create speckled colorways and how to create variegated colorways on non-superwash yarn. Because non-superwash yarn is just inherently not going to take the dye as quickly or in the same fashion as superwash yarn. And most dyers will start with superwash yarn. Superwash yarn just is easier to dye because you don't have to worry about it felting. You can heat it up, you can move it around, and you can create those brilliantly sharp, bright speckles because it has been prepared to take the dye. It is ready to take the dye. So part of that tutorial was to demonstrate how you can still get a variegated colorway. You can still get speckles. They're just going to look a little bit different. They're going to look a little bit more watercolor-like. So anyway, so this is how this turned out. So even though we poured our colors on separate sections of the yarn, you can see that, it being a non-superwash yarn, it did blend together quite a bit. And so that's what gives it that kind of, almost more semi-tonal look rather than a variegated look. But there are very distinct sections of blue and very distinct sections of green. And I think that you would definitely see that when you started to knit or crochet with this. I think that you would definitely see that you would have areas of your fabric that are very distinctly green and very distinctly blue. So very pretty indeed. In the video, I had mentioned a fifth technique. When we were dyeing the variegated colorway, I had mentioned another technique that you can use there's so many different ways that you can combine colors, that instead of, pouring your colors, one next to each other, another thing that you can try is that if you did want more of a tonal effect, but you wanted to mix the colors together, is that you can just dye the whole skein with one color and essentially over dye it with another color. And every time you start adding one color over another color, you're always going to start getting areas that are almost going to resist the next color. So, they don't really come out truly solid once you start layering the colors. But they will get a more even look. They won't be as variegated, and you won't have that kind of self-striping look to it like this one has, like how this one had a long section of, where'd you go? So you can see this has a long section of green right here and then a long section of blue. So when you're knitting with it, you're going to get that kind of striping effect. So off camera, I had a couple skeins that were still in the soaking bucket. So I went ahead and did that technique where I took the same recipe that we used for this variegated one, and I did just that. So I dyed it blue, completely blue first, 100% blue, and then over dyed it. These are all going like the wrong way. And then over dyed it completely with the green. So you can see it looks very similar, very, very similar to this color. But the difference being that we've removed that kind of self-striping effect, that we no longer have long sections of blue and green. You're going to have little blips here and there, little splishes and splashes. So like here's kind of a larger section. There's some green. So you're going to have like little splashes and sprays and whatnot where you're going to see a stitch or two of green, a stitch or two of blue, but it's going to be a much more blend of color. So again, just depending on, you know, what kind of fabric you like. It's just a different method. Same exact recipe. A very similar way of adding the dyes, but you potentially get two very different fabrics. So I always just find that really cool in a way to kind of manipulate. So the very last technique that we did was speckling. I feel like speckling is everyone's favorite, maybe. I just love the way that this came out. So pretty. So again, we only used two colors. We used Dharma Blue Steel and Dharma Forest Green, and just hand speckled randomly on the skeins, and it's so pretty. It's so pretty. So speckling on non-superwash yarn, because it just is not going to take the dye as quickly as a superwash, I say it you know, comes out looking more like a Monet painting rather than having those sharp, crisp speckles that you might be used to seeing on like a superwash yarn. But it is still beautiful, and you still get areas of really nice defined speckles. I mean, that spot is pretty well defined. And so in the video, you know, we talked about, you know, things that you can do to make sure that your yarn is ready to receive the dye, so that you can get as sharp, bright, crisp a speckle as possible. So making sure that your pan is super hot, making sure that your yarn is well saturated, that it has been soaking. I like to soak it overnight if I'm going to be doing speckles, making sure that it has been in acid for at least a couple hours before speckling, and then making sure it's hot. So like I won't put speckles on yarn until it's basically close to boil. And then that way your yarn is as ready as it can possibly be to receive those speckles. And that way, even on non-superwash yarn, you can get some pretty sharp, brilliant speckles. I hope this comes out, because I mean, that is a defined sharp speckle, if I say so. So yeah, so this yarn definitely, wow, this whole area, that whole area came out so good. This yarn definitely A+ for non-superwash yarn speckling. Yeah, oh, this whole section, look at this. Look at those speckles. Like, I'm so impressed with just how well this yarn speckled. So good. So I'm very pleased, very happy. This came out beautiful. So yeah, that's all I have. Awkward. I feel like I never know, how to end these things, but yeah, that's all I have. So, I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you enjoyed the yarn dyeing tutorial and this wrap up. And if there are future tutorials that you want to see, if there are techniques that you want to see, if you have questions about yarn dyeing, please share them. Please put them in the comments. I love sharing yarn dyeing. I love sharing what I do with you. And it always helps to know what you are interested in and what you want to know more about and what you want to learn. So is there a particular yarn base or fiber blend that you're interested in learning more about or seeing in the dye pans? Is there a particular color that you want to see how it dyes? Is there a particular technique? Please let me know, because I definitely want to do more of this. So until next time, I will definitely be back in the yarn dyeing studio very soon, because I already have received another wonderful package of yarn from Nomad, and so I'll be setting up very soon. So thank you.